Queens of the World. Empress Matilda, England's first Queen Regnant. Thank you to FAQ 202 from Forio for sponsoring this video. I have profiled all of England's remarkable queens who ruled in their own right. Mary I, Elizabeth I, Mary II, Anne, Victoria, and Elizabeth II. But there's one more fascinating woman I simply must profile to complete the set. Empress Matilda. She was sent to Germany as a child to marry the Holy Roman Emperor, but after a shipwreck swallowed her only brother, she returned to England to claim the crown. Had she been born a man, she would have been an undisputed monarch. But her sex allowed her cousin, Stephen, to get his butt on the throne first. Their family feud led to 15 years of civil war, known as the Anarchy, from which neither emerged as a true monarch. Fans of House of the Dragon will recognize Matilda as the inspiration for Rhaenyra Targaryen, and Matilda was portrayed by Alison Pill in the 2010 historical fiction Pillars of the Earth. But let's explore her true story without the addition of fire-breathing lizards, and decide if Empress Matilda truly was the first Queen Regnant of England. Matilda was probably born on February 7, 1102. The union of her parents, King Henry I of England and Matilda of Scotland, was rife with drama. Henry's father, William the Conqueror, had claimed England and transformed the Anglo-Saxon backwater into a sophisticated continental kingdom covered in castles. Upon his death, he handed the throne to his son, William II, but he somehow found an arrow through his heart during a hunting trip with his younger brother, Henry, who promptly seized the throne. England was, as usual, at war with Scotland. King Malcolm III was killed in battle, and his Anglo-Saxon wife, Princess Margaret of Wessex, died of grief. King Henry I claimed their daughter, Matilda, as his bride. She had been living in a convent, and there were concerns that she had taken holy vows, which would make her ineligible to marry, though she perpetually swore that she had not. The union meant peace in Britannia, and Matilda's Anglo-Saxon blood legitimized the fledgling Norman dynasty. It is through her that the modern royal family can trace their ancestry back to Aethelstan, the first King of England. Henry was fond of Matilda. He admired her intelligence and didn't mind that she dressed modestly and refused to paint her face like other ladies. She gave generously to the poor and built public lavatories, bathhouses, and a leprosy hospital. She was a patron of the arts, music, and architecture, and was much more popular than her husband. Most queen consorts were expected to produce as many offspring as possible to secure the succession. In the first 3 years of her marriage, Matilda gave birth to a daughter, also named Matilda, and a son, William. But after that, no more royal babies appeared. It is not clear if this is because the queen suffered a gynecological injury, because of the royal couple's extended separations, or because Matilda's piety caused her to avoid sex. King Henry was notoriously unfaithful and fathered at least 22 children out of wedlock. But with a healthy son and daughter, the royal couple felt that they had secured the Norman dynasty. Queen Matilda educated her children in reading, writing, and religious devotion. Princess Matilda was described by contemporary chroniclers as very beautiful, but they had a tendency to gush over the virtues of all royals, so take it with a grain of salt. If you want to ensure that future historians remember you looking fresh-faced and fancy-free, then try FAQ 202 by Forio. It's the new generation of LED face mask. You simply apply the FAQ primer to a clean, dry face. This Manuka Honey Primer goes on so smooth. Then secure the mask with the adjustable headband. Select the light color you want or pre-programmed treatments with the Swiss app. The LED mask uses 8 different light wavelengths, including NIR, to tackle signs of aging and other skin concerns. It's ultra lightweight and wireless, so you can enjoy your treatment while relaxing or doing daily activities. That makes it easy for me to incorporate the mask into my routine. It re-strengthens layers of the skin and boosts the skin's natural healing process, leaving your face smoother, softer, and with fewer fine lines and wrinkles. The FAQ 202 mask also evens out skin tone, minimizes pores, and reduces sunspots and redness. For a complexion even a Holy Roman Empress would envy. The FAQ 202 is rarely on discount, but by clicking the link below in the description and using my code TEATIME30, you can get 30% off Foreo's fantastic products, including the FAQ 202 face mask. And now, back to history. When Matilda was 8 years old, ambassadors arrived to negotiate her marriage to Henry V, King of the Germans. The English King Henry was keen to marry his daughter into one of the most prestigious dynasties in Europe, and he was willing to pay handsomely for the honor. The German King Henry needed Matilda's dowry of 15,000 pounds of silver to fund his expedition to Rome to be crowned Holy Roman Emperor by the Pope. The child princess bride boarded a ship and crossed the Channel. She met her 24-year-old husband and was crowned Queen of the Germans. As she was still far too young to be a wife, she was entrusted to an archbishop who educated her in the German language and customs. While Henry was waiting for his bride to grow up, he made the crucial trip to Rome. His father, Henry IV, had quarreled with both his nobles and the Pope, to the extent that he was excommunicated twice. He supposedly performed black masses on the naked body of his second wife, Euphrasia of Kiev. When she escaped to tell her tale, nobles once again rose up against the emperor in favor of his sons, Conrad and Henry. Conrad was killed in battle, but Henry successfully usurped the throne from his father. He was then indebted to the bishops and nobles who had helped him claim the throne early. They literally took the crown off his head and refused to return the royal regalia, so he wouldn't forget who was really in charge. Frustrated, Henry traveled to Rome, captured Pope Paschal II, and forced him to perform his imperial coronation. Henry V came back to Germany as a bona fide Holy Roman Emperor, intent on revenge against the nobles who had humiliated him. Just before her 12th birthday, Matilda married Henry in a spectacular ceremony. Princes traveled from far and wide to attend the nuptials. But political intrigues pulled focus from the bride. Duke Lothar of Supplinburg appeared barefoot in the cloak of a pilgrim and publicly submitted to the emperor. But other nobles were not willing to do the same and were infuriated by Henry's impertinent demonstrations of power. The atmosphere was dampened by grumbling and plotting. Now that she was empress, Matilda entered court life and was granted her own household. She sponsored royal grants, dealt with petitioners, and participated in ceremonies. She was by her husband's side when he invaded Italy. They chased off Pope Paschal and installed their own anti-pope, Gregory VIII. He crowned Matilda Holy Roman Empress in St. Peter's Basilica on Easter Sunday, 1117. She would use the title of Empress from then on. Henry left his now 16-year-old bride behind to rule Italy while he traveled back across the Alps. Matilda gained considerable experience in statecraft during her 2 years of governing. Her husband prioritized her role as a political partner over her use as a broodmare. Their marriage remained childless, owing first to her young age and later to their extended separations. There is some evidence that Matilda delivered a child who died shortly after birth, but the royal couple assumed that they had plenty of time to get together in the future and produce an heir. Meanwhile, in England, Matilda's mother, Queen Matilda of Scotland, died at 37. Then King Henry married their son, William, to Matilda of Anjou. He passed to his heir his own title of Duke of Normandy. The kings of England still held this land in the north of France, which had belonged to William the Conqueror. In November 1120, the 17-year-old prince was headed across the Channel back to England. After a night of heavy drinking, some of his entourage, including his cousin Stephen of Blois, opted to stay on land and nurse their aching heads and stomachs. But William and many other rowdy young courtiers, including several of his illegitimate siblings, felt up to the sea voyage. They stocked the white ship with plenty of hair of the dog and continued partying as the crew prepared to set sail. The captain asked the prince if he and his men could also partake in the wine, and William heartily agreed, the more the merrier. By the time the ship left the harbor, it was night, and the passengers and crew were all 3 sheets to the wind. The white ship was a new, fast vessel, and the revelers egged the captain on, encouraging him to overtake the king's ship, which had set sail hours earlier, and make it to England first. But in the dark, the crew made mistakes, and the port side struck a submerged rock. The mood switched quickly from joy to terror as the ship began to capsize. Prince William was able to escape on a small boat, but he returned to help others, and his vessel was swamped by drowning men and women. The prince was pulled under the waves with them. Over 300 perished in the white ship disaster, and along with them, the hopes for the future of the Norman dynasty. It was said that King Henry never smiled again. He was plagued by nightmares of the succession crisis that would follow his death. He would have been content to spend the rest of his life as a womanizing widower, but within 2 months of his son's demise, he married Adeliza of Louvain. She was 18 and he 53. The king was desperate to get her pregnant and brought her with him everywhere. She prayed that she would conceive, but she never did. In a time when monarchs needed to lead their armies into battle, the rules of primogeniture, or eldest son automatically takes the throne, were not the norm. Instead, leadership could be claimed by any close adult male relative. Henry couldn't really complain, as he used this same dynastic flexibility to skip his own older brothers in the line of succession. He may have been considering his nephews, Stephen of Blois and William Clito, and even his own illegitimate son, Robert of Gloucester, as potential heirs. But a woman had never before ruled England, so his only surviving legitimate child, Matilda, who was far away in the empire, was not seriously considered. Nevertheless, the Empress attempted to travel home to England to console her father and possibly push for her own right to the throne. But her journey was prevented by conflict on the continent. She was by her husband's side in 1122 at the Council of Worms, where he made peace with the church. The couple finally got a little alone time together on a trip down the Rhine. But no babies resulted, as the emperor was by then sick with cancer. He died at the age of 43. With no heirs to follow him, the Salian dynasty came to an end. A new king of the Romans, Lothar III, was elected instead. 23-year-old Dowager Empress Matilda had lost her position. As she had no sons for which to act as regent, she was left with 2 options if she wanted to stay in Germany: become a nun or remarry. Many princes proposed, but she opted to return to England, where she had better prospects. As she expected never to return to the empire, she gave up her estates and bid farewell to everyone she had known since the age of 8. She brought only her personal jewels and 2 of Henry's crowns with her. With his daughter now single and back in England, and one of his nephews in open rebellion against him, King Henry decided to buck tradition and name Matilda as his heir. He ordered his bishops and nobles to swear fealty to her, and he arranged her second marriage to Geoffrey, the eldest son of Count Fulk IV of Anjou. He was the brother of Prince William's widow, Matilda of Anjou. Geoffrey was handsome, red-haired, jovial, and a renowned warrior. His nickname, Plantagenet, sprung from the yellow sprig of broom blossoms, or in Latin, plant genist, he wore in his hat. Matilda was unimpressed with her groom. She saw going from an emperor to the son of a count as a serious downgrade. Plus, she was 25 and he was only 13. Shortly after the wedding, she left him and returned home. But she was persuaded that bearing a son would significantly improve her own position as heir to the throne, so she returned to her husband. It helped that his father had gone on crusade and upgraded him to Count of Anjou. Still, Matilda never used the title of Countess, preferring instead to be called either Empress or King Henry's daughter. Matilda gave birth to a healthy baby boy, named Henry after his delighted grandfather. A second son, Geoffrey, followed. His delivery was difficult, and Matilda nearly died. The couple and King Henry fell out over the possession of castles in Normandy. They had been granted to Matilda as part of her dowry, and their control would put her in a better position to claim England when the time came. But her father feared that Geoffrey would use them to launch a conquest of Normandy and even claim England for himself. After all, the law deemed that a woman's property really belonged to her husband. While King Henry was in Normandy dealing with this fresh family feud, he tucked into his favorite dinner, a surfeit of lampreys. This jawless parasitic fish was considered a delicacy by both the ancient Romans and the medieval upper class. Henry's physicians warned him not to overindulge in such rich morsels, but apparently he overdid it, as he was gripped by a terrible rumbling in the gut. Some species of lamprey are toxic if not properly cleaned, or it may have been food poisoning. Either way, Henry was miserable, as, over the course of a week, he slowly weakened from constant purging. He died in 1118 at 67. Unlike today, the heir to the throne did not automatically become monarch on the death of their predecessor. They had to be crowned and proclaimed by the people in order to officially commence their reign. When news of the king's death got out, Matilda was heavily pregnant with her third child and unable to travel. She had to watch from France as her cousin, Stephen of Blois, sailed to London. He was William the Conqueror's grandson by one of his daughters, Adela. Stephen made the case that King Henry had been wrong to make him and other nobles swear loyalty to Matilda, that she was illegitimate anyway because her mother had been a nun before she married the king, and that Henry had changed his mind on his deathbed and named Stephen heir, of which there is zero proof. Whatever the truth, the people of London liked the cut of Stephen's jib and proclaimed him king. The church, under the guidance of his brother, the Bishop of Winchester, crowned him in Westminster Abbey on December 22nd. Matilda gave birth to a third son, William, but her baby had cost her England. She remained in France, building up her army and biding her time for 3 years. By then, the excitement Stephen rode in on had faded. He was charming, attractive, and a brave warrior, but he lacked cunning and failed to inspire loyalty. He reneged on favors he had promised the nobles and clergy, and was even removing some of their rights. Matilda's uncle, King David I of Scotland, supported her, and made trouble for Stephen by invading the north and taking Carlisle and Newcastle. Matilda's illegitimate half-brother, the powerful Robert, Earl of Gloucester, also brought his significant support to Matilda. Sensing her cousin's weakness, the Empress appealed to Pope Innocent II to declare her the rightful queen, but he declined to make a decision. Holding fast to her convictions, Matilda left her husband and children and sailed for England. She went first to Arundel Castle to stay with her stepmother, Adeliza. But Stephen besieged the castle. He could have had his cousin imprisoned or even killed, ending the conflict there. But out of a sense of chivalry or familial loyalty, he let her go. She met up with Robert and set up her own court near Gloucester. Nobles who were disenchanted with Stephen flocked to support her. Soon the country was divided, with half being controlled by Matilda, half by Stephen, and both claiming to be monarch. The chaos came to be known as the Anarchy. In 1141, the tide turned in Matilda's favor. Stephen was captured at the Battle of Lincoln and brought to her in chains. She ordered the usurper to be imprisoned at Bristol Castle and set about arranging her own coronation. But this would take careful diplomacy and garnering more support from those who had previously sworn fealty to Stephen. She offered to grant the Bishop of Winchester control over church affairs in her new government, and he agreed to betray his brother. He called the clergy to Winchester, where they declared that Matilda should be the monarch, pending her coronation in Westminster Abbey. Henry handed her the royal treasury, which had been greatly depleted by Stephen. Matilda then took the title Lady of the English and the Normans. The Constable of the Tower of London welcomed her in, and plans were underway for the coronation of England's first Queen Regnant. During this time, Matilda was effectively ruler of England. She minted coins with her own image and created new earldoms to reward her loyal supporters. But Stephen's most faithful ally turned out to be his wife, Queen Matilda of Bologna. The story that she begged the Empress on her knees for her husband's release is probably apocryphal, but she did position her army outside the city to intimidate the citizens. Inside the tower, things were not going well for the Empress. The men she needed to support her saw her as proud, haughty, imperious, and behaving in a manner unbecoming the modesty of her sex. Whether she actually behaved badly, or if this was an early case of a woman being vilified for daring to claim power, is up for interpretation. Either way, Matilda was unable to walk the razor-thin line of maintaining control while not putting any men's noses out of joint. And she did the one thing that everybody hates. She levied taxes. Shortly before her planned coronation, Londoners rose up against the Empress, and with the eager help of Queen Matilda, they pushed her out of the city, sans crown. But all was not lost for the would-be queen. Her husband was having great success conquering Normandy, and he forced many Anglo-Norman barons to back her. Plus, she still had Stephen under lock and key. But many of her wayward supporters were defecting back to him, most importantly, the Bishop of Winchester. When Matilda learned that he had abandoned her, she besieged him. But Queen Matilda encircled and defeated the Empress's army. Robert of Gloucester was captured in battle. Now each Matilda had the other's most important man in chains. The two Matildas agreed on a stalemate and exchanged prisoners, Robert for Stephen. Now free, Stephen was welcomed back in London and crowned for a second time, just to rub it in. Empress Matilda was not willing to give up. She sent Robert to Normandy to rally support from her husband. While he was gone, Stephen surrounded her in Oxford Castle and planned to starve her out over the winter. Matilda and her knights made a daring escape. They dressed in white to blend in with the snow, scaled down the castle wall on a rope, then walked across the freezing Thames to safety. Matilda established a new stronghold in Wiltshire and settled in for a long stalemate. The Empress nearly captured Stephen again at the siege of Wilton Castle, but neither cousin could take full control of the country. Geoffrey had better success in Normandy, where he was declared Duke in 1144. He and Matilda shared custody of their eldest son, Henry, and both trained him to be a king. In 1147, Matilda's greatest ally, Robert, died peacefully, and many of her and Stephen's knights left to join the Second Crusade. In 1148, Matilda returned to Normandy after a decade of warfare in England. She stopped using the title Lady of the English and entrusted her fight for the throne to her son, Henry. He was now a strapping young knight of 15. Stephen was also thinking about the future, and he was determined that his own son, Eustace, would follow him on the throne. Geoffrey handed Normandy to his son before he died of fever at 38. Now Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou, Henry multiplied his power by marrying Eleanor, Duchess of Aquitaine. She had just gotten out of an unhappy, sexless marriage with King Louis VII of France. The intelligent and cunning 30-year-old Eleanor saw great potential in 21-year-old Henry. With her financial and martial support, he was able to mount an invasion of England in 1153. The English had grown weary of the long conflict. Many acknowledged that Henry had a superior claim to the throne, and most crucially, a penis. So he received much more enthusiasm than his mother had. Before any battles could be fought, the church offered to negotiate a truce, and the exhausted King Stephen was willing to come to the table. The Treaty of Winchester ended the anarchy, with the agreement that Stephen would remain king for the rest of his life, but Henry would be his heir. Disinherited, Eustace left court in a fury. He conveniently died a month later at 23. Some say of a broken heart, others that he was struck down by God while plundering church land. Henry didn't have to wait long for his throne. King Stephen died the following year of a stomach ailment at 58. King Henry II and Queen Eleanor were crowned in Westminster Abbey just before Christmas in 1154. Upon his head was placed a crown his mother had brought from the Holy Roman Empire back in 1125. Matilda spent the rest of her life in Normandy, where she governed her son's lands and held court in Rouen. Henry relied on her advice. She was a key diplomat and brokered good relations with France and the Empire. Matilda died of natural causes at 65 on September 10, 1167. She was an ancestor of all kings and Queens Regnant of England to follow. She was buried under the high altar at the Abbey of Béquelouan in Rouen. Her tomb reads, "Great by birth, greater by marriage, greatest in her offspring. Here lies Matilda, the daughter, wife, and mother of Henry." This epitaph may seem achingly familiar. A woman who is defined not by her own achievements, but by her relationships to men. So, should Matilda be counted as the first Queen Regnant of England, or not? Those who argue against certainly have technicality on their side. In her time, one had to have an actual coronation to be considered monarch of England. This custom didn't change until 1272, when Matilda's great-grandson Henry III died while his son Edward I was on crusade. Because he wasn't able to get back to Westminster Abbey quickly, he was proclaimed king in Sicily. From then on, the coronation remained an important symbol, but a new monarch's reign begins the moment their predecessor dies. Later kings, Edward V and Edward VIII, never had coronations either, yet they are still counted as official monarchs. Some point to her title as Lady of the English rather than Queen, but this comes down to a mistranslation of Latin. Regina Angulorum, or Queen of the English, explicitly meant a queen consort, the wife of a ruling king. Matilda wanted to make it clear that she was the one in charge, so she preferred the title Dominia Angulorum, the female equivalent of Master of England, a domineering title which has since been translated to the more subdued Lady of the English. Others look to Matilda's support and power, or lack thereof, to define her role. She was proclaimed by the church, minted coins, and created earldoms, but she never had complete control over the nation. Some lay the fault at Matilda's own feet, claiming her abrasive personality and unwillingness to compromise cost her the crown. Queen Matilda, Stephen's wife, who also stepped far outside the bounds of womanhood and controlled an army, was far more favorably viewed by her contemporaries. But crucially, she was acting in service of her husband, not daring to act for herself. At the end of the day, had Empress Matilda been born a man, she would have been an uncontested king, whatever her real or perceived personality flaws might have been. The royal family's official website includes Matilda in its list of official English monarchs. However, the Encyclopedia Britannica does not. I suppose the true test would be if ever another Matilda inherits the throne. Then it would have to be officially decided if she would be enumerated Matilda I or Matilda II. Interestingly, in Denmark, this exact scenario occurred. When Margrethe inherited the throne in 1972, she decided to be the second to clearly define the role of her long-disputed ancestor, Margrethe I. So, if Prince George of Wales ever sees this, seriously consider the name Matilda for your future daughter and finally end this historic argument. So what do you think? Should Empress Matilda be counted as the first Queen Regnant of England or no? Whatever title she is given by posterity, Matilda is a woman who should not soon be forgotten. Want even more tea on history? Check out the History Tea Time podcast. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and check out my other history videos. You can also join my Patreon to support my work and get early access to all of my multi-part series. Thank you for watching.